Our next speaker is Chief of Police Dan Thurston. Dan is married to Jackie Green Thurston. He has sons Trey and Ryan and daughter Tricia. And Chief, really glad to have you here.
Thanks, Rick. When he started talking about dignitaries, I knew I was the next speaker. I was hoping he was talking about me, not those in the back. I want to say, first of all, that I'm honored and humbled. I'm honored and humbled to be the Chief of Police for the Madison Police Department. And I'm also honored and humbled that Lisa and the organizers of this event would ask me to be here. When I think of law enforcement, I think of firearms. A story comes to mind when actually took place before I hired on. I've never confirmed that this occurred or not, but we had a police officer who liked to eat a lot, and come to find out his speed loaders were full of jelly beans and not rounds. So that occurred prior to my starting with the Madison Police Department. Like I said, I'm not going to release that name either. It is a fact. Sheriff Wall says it's a fact. To give you a little history about me, my hiring, I hired on the department in 1992. I was laid off from a job in Indianapolis. My brother-in-law gave me a call, who worked for the Madison Police Department, said, I don't know if you're interested or not, but we are taking applications. You won't get laid off here because crime does go on. And I'd like to thank Sheriff Wallace, who is my brother-in-law, and he made that phone call, because my life changed that day. Because of that, I grew up in a household that we didn't have any firearms in our house. So when I hired on, things had to change at our house. We'd never had a gun in the house, not only growing up, but obviously in Jackie and I's house. So as Lisa mentioned earlier, what comes with rights also brings responsibility. So we had to change kind of the way we lived, and the way we brought up our children changed that day. So we had to change some things. So my emphasis today is going to be on safety. And maybe the first firearm safety point I'm going to bring up is maybe the most basic, and that is make sure the barrel is always pointed in a safe direction. Now, doesn't that sound like the simplest thing I could say? However, if everyone did that, there'd never be a firearm accident. There'd never be an accidental shooting. Okay, so that's very important. Keep your weapons unloaded when not in use. If ever you're handling a firearm, don't assume that it's unloaded. Check it yourself. If someone else hands you a firearm, you check it. If you hand a firearm to someone else, check it before you hand the firearm to that person. Don't rely on the safety. We even hear that from our own police officers. Well, the safety's on. Well, you know what? That safety is just a mechanism that is supposed to supplement the proper handling of that firearm. And we all know that mechanisms, no matter what they are, tend to fail sometimes. Okay? So never trust that safety. Be sure of your target, and maybe most importantly, be sure of what's behind your target. Okay? Because not all of us hit that target every single time. Okay? So we need to be aware of what is behind that target, because once a round is fired, it can never be brought back again. If your gun fails to fire, handle it with care. That's kind of self-explanatory. And have your weapons serviced and cleaned regularly. I also want to touch a little bit on training. We at the police department train at least twice a year. Last couple of years we've been training over Christmas time too, getting a third week of training in. The old style of training, we lined up on the 3-yard line, 6 police officers wide, 6 targets. Firearm instructor said, ready on the left, ready on the right, fire X number of times, back up to the 7-yard line, the 15-yard line. Well, what we found out in law enforcement, that's not real effective, because if we, heaven forbid, get in a firefight, we're not going to say, everybody ready? Stand here right across from somebody and fire. Okay? So what we've incorporated movement, we've incorporated shoot versus don't shoot decision-making type training. We've added stress to those training situations, because believe me, that firefight happens. There's going to be some stress involved. So we have an outstanding training staff who are constantly coming up with new shooting scenarios for us, or don't shoot scenarios for us. So that's a little bit about what we do at training. In closing, just when I think of the Second Amendment, I'm a firm believer in people's rights to bear arms, which I think sometimes comes as a surprise to coming from a law enforcement official, because let's face it, we don't want to face people who have firearms. But I believe that people have that right. But I'm also a firm believer in thorough, in-depth background checks. But I believe that guns don't kill people, people kill people.
That's right.
It doesn't matter if it's a homicide or accidental shooting, someone either pulled the trigger or was careless in handling that firearm. Okay, that's all I have, unless anybody has any questions for me. Thank you.